Pallavi. Our second panelist is Dr. Sri Lakshmi, IVF specialist from Vijayawada, Andhra Pradesh. She will explain about the causes of IVF failure. Welcome, Dr. Sri Lakshmi. Welcoming our third panelist, Dr. Ritu Hinduja, fertility specialist from Andheri, Mumbai. She will take us through the treatment options, sperm and uterus. Welcome, Dr. Ritu. Our fourth panelist for today is Dr. Kritika Devi, fertility specialist from Chennai, Tamil Nadu. She will talk to us about treatment options, embryo. Welcome, Dr. Kritika.
Thank you.
Welcoming all the panelists and all the attendees to the webinar series once again. Now I would like to invite Dr. Pallavi Prasad to take us through what is realistic success rate of IVF and what does it depend on. Before she starts, I would like to request all the attendees, if you have any questions, please post your questions in question and answer. So once all the panelists complete their session, we will take one by one. Over to you, Dr. Pallavi.
Good evening, everyone. Myself, Dr. Pallavi, and I'll be speaking on the topic, what is the realistic success rate of IVF and what does it depend on? So the overall IVF success rate, what I mean by success rate is the pregnancy rate is around 65%. मतलब तकरीबन 65% लोगों को पहले ही बार में प्रेगनेंसी हो जाती है. The factors affecting IVF success rate वो मेनली क्या क्या है? एज ऑफ द वुमन, औरत की उम्र क्या है, इस कपल में हस्बैंड वाइफ को पहले कभी बच्चा हुआ है कि नहीं हुआ, हिस्ट्री ऑफ प्रीवियस प्रेगनेंसी प्लेज एन इम्पोर्टेंट रोल. देन सिवियरिटी ऑफ द फर्टिलिटी प्रॉब्लम, इस कपल को प्रेगनेंसी जब नहीं हो रही उसका कारण कितना सीवियर है उस पे प्रेगनेंसी डिपेंड करती है. लाइफस्टाइल हैबिट्स जैसे कि स्मोकिंग और वेट, उसके बारे में मैं आगे बताऊंगी. एंड द चॉइस ऑफ द फर्टिलिटी क्लिनिक. Now coming to the first factor, which is one of the most important factor, that is age of the woman. So this is the single most important determinant of IVF success rate. औरत की उम्र क्या है. जैसे जैसे उम्र बढ़ती जाती है IVF का सक्सेस रेट कम होता जाता है. जब हम लाइव बर्थ रेट की बात करते हैं, सिर्फ प्रेगनेंसी रेट नहीं, मतलब औरत को IVF करने के बाद, प्रेगनेंसी होने के बाद 9 महीने अच्छी तरह से गर्भ चल करके वो डिलीवरी करके टेक होम बेबी रेट जो होता है, डिलीवरी होकर के अच्छा हेल्दी बच्चा पैदा होने के चांसेस 35 साल की कम उम्र में करीबन 42% है. मतलब अगर हम लोग 10 औरतों को 35 ईयर से कम में IVF करें तो 4 जो है घर बच्चा लेकर के जा पाती हैं. वहीं पर ये जो रेट है लाइव बर्थ रेट 40 से ज्यादा की उम्र में सिर्फ 12% रह जाता है. मतलब अगर हम 10 का IVF करें तो शायद सिर्फ 1 या 2 औरत डिलीवरी करके घर बच्चा लेकर के जा पाती हैं. तो ये एज के साथ जो प्रेगनेंसी रेट IVF का कम होता है, ये 2 कारणों से कम होता है. एक तो कि अंडे कम होते जाते हैं और दूसरा कि क्वालिटी जो अंडों की है वो कम होती जाती है. तो ये जो अंडे कैसे औरत की कम होती है समझने के लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. ये मैसेज हम सबको देना चाहते हैं, सभी लोग समझें कि औरत के अंडे जो होते हैं वो उसके जन्म के पहले से ही डिसाइड हो जाते हैं और ये अंडों के नंबर जो है कम ही हो सकते हैं, बढ़ नहीं सकते. मतलब एक कन्या का जो भ्रूण है अपनी माँ के गर्भ में जब रहती है तो करीबन 60 से 70 लाख होता है. जब वो जन्मती है तब भी कम होकर के 10 से 20 लाख ही रह जाता है. और जब लड़की बड़ी होती है तब भी कम होकर के सिर्फ 3 से 5 लाख, 37 साल की उम्र में सिर्फ 25,000 रह जाता है. तो ये कुदरत ने ऐसे बनाया है कि 40-42 तक होते होते हम औरतों के सारे अंडे खत्म हो जाते हैं. तो जब औरत के अंडों का नंबर कम होता है तो ऑब्वियसली प्रेगनेंसी चांसेस कम हो जाते हैं. तो वन थिंग इज अबाउट द रिडक्शन इन द नंबर ऑफ एग्स. और दूसरी बात क्या होती है, जो अंडे बचे हुए हैं उनकी भी क्वालिटी कम होने लगती है. तो अगर प्रेगनेंसी होती भी है तो भी औरत प्रेगनेंसी को 9 महीने चला करके डिलीवरी हेल्दी बच्चे की नहीं कर पाती. अमूमन वो अबॉर्शन रेट्स बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ जाते हैं. तो इन 2 कारणों के कारण लाइव बर्थ रेट जो 10 में से 4 औरत 35 साल की कम उम्र में है वो घट करके 10 में सिर्फ 1 अगर वो 40 से ज्यादा में आईवीएफ अपने अंडों के साथ करा रही है। इसीलिए हम लोग हमेशा स्ट्रेस करते हैं कि आपके फर्टिलिटी ट्रीटमेंट करने के लिए, आईवीएफ ट्रीटमेंट करने के लिए औरत की उम्र सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट है। और ये 24 से 35 साल की उम्र में जो पेशेंट्स आईवीएफ ट्राई करते हैं उनका सक्सेस रेट डेफिनेटली ज्यादा होता है। और इस सक्सेस रेट मेनली अंडों के कारण है, क्योंकि 40, 42 की, 45 की उम्र में भी अगर औरत डोनर अंडों के साथ आईवीएफ करती है तो टेक होम बेबी रेट 51%, मतलब 10 में से 5 औरत बच्चा घर लेकर के जा पाती है अगर वो डोनर एग यूज करती है। तो एज ऑफ द वुमन has got an important impact on the quality and the quantity of the egg reserve of the woman, and thereby it directly interpolates into reduction of IVF success rate as the age of the woman advances. So the appropriate age to start fertility treatment to go for IVF is between 24 to 35 years of woman age. जो नेक्स्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर है वो कपल हिस्ट्री। कपल हिस्ट्री मैंने इसलिए लिखी है, नॉट जस्ट वुमन हिस्ट्री, सेम पार्टनर, सेम हस्बैंड के साथ उन लोगों की मैरिटल हिस्ट्री कैसी है, ऑब्स्टेट्रिक हिस्ट्री कैसी है। तो अगर कपल को पहले कभी बच्चा हो चुका है, लाइव बर्थ है, और उसके बाद दूसरे बच्चे के लिए प्रॉब्लम हो रही है, दिस इज अ गुड प्रोग्नोसिस। अमूमन ऐसे पेशेंट्स को सक्सेस रेट ज्यादा होता है। और दूसरी बात है मैरिटल हिस्ट्री। जो पेशेंट्स कम 3 साल, 2 साल, 3 साल, 4 साल शादी के बाद ही ट्रीटमेंट शुरू कर देते हैं, वो उनका सक्सेस रेट ज्यादा होता है कंपेयर टू जो पेशेंट्स 15 साल, 20 साल शादी के बाद हमारे पास आते हैं ट्रीटमेंट के लिए। The third thing is about the severity of the fertility problem. जब आप फर्टिलिटी स्पेशलिस्ट के पास जाते हैं तो हम 3 चीजें मेनली हमें देखनी होती हैं कि वो ठीक है कि नहीं ठीक है, फर्टिलिटी की प्रॉब्लम क्यों हो रही है, आइदर अंडों में प्रॉब्लम है, वेदर इट इज अबाउट द ओवेरियन रिजर्व, या फिर गर्भ के बारे में प्रॉब्लम है, या फिर हस्बैंड का प्रॉब्लम है। तो जो ओवेरियन रिजर्व जो मैंने आपको बताया वो 2 तरीके से पता किया जाता है। एक तो स्कैन होता है जो अंदरूनी स्कैन है, जो सेकेंड डे थर्ड डे ट्रांसवेजाइनल स्कैन जो कहते हैं, इट इज एन इंटरनल स्कैन डन व्हेन द वुमन इज मेंस्ट्रुएटिंग। जिस स्कैन से हमें पता चलता है कि जो ओवरीज हैं उनमें अंडे कितने हैं। दूसरा जो है वो ब्लड टेस्ट है जो कभी भी कराया जा सकता है, जिसे हम कहते हैं एंटी मुलेरियन हार्मोन। तो ये ओवेरियन रिजर्व जिस पेशेंट का अच्छा होता है उनका सक्सेस रेट ज्यादा होने का चांस है, जिनका कम होता है उनका सक्सेस रेट कम होने का चांस है। लेकिन यहाँ पर मैं एक इंपॉर्टेंट बात बताती हूँ, ओवेरियन रिजर्व हैज गॉट इट्स प्ले अलोंग विद द एज ऑफ द वुमन। सेम ओवेरियन रिजर्व कम हुआ ही, जैसे 0.8 है, 0.9 AMH, अगर औरत की उम्र कम है 25 साल 26 साल, तो ये लोग प्रेगनेंसी करके लाइव बर्थ लेकर के जा पाती हैं। वहीं पर जब 35 साल 37 साल की उम्र में 0.8 AMH है, 0.7 AMH, it technically becomes very difficult to give them a live birth with self egg IVF. जो दूसरा इंपॉर्टेंट है वो यूट्रस, मतलब कि जो जमीन जिसमें आपको अपना बच्चा पनपाना है। जिन लोगों को गर्भ में प्रॉब्लम होती है उन लोगों को हम हमेशा, जैसे कि किसी को गर्भ में रसौली है, फाइब्रॉइड्स हैं, या पॉलिप्स हैं, या गर्भ में कई बार जैसे जालियां बन जाती हैं, एडिशंस हो जाते हैं, या कई बार जो मेंसेस का ब्लड है वो गर्भ की दीवारों में चला जाता है, जिसे हम एडिनोमाइसिस कहते हैं, या कई लोगों को गर्भ में पार्टीशन होता है, सेप्टम होता है। तो कभी भी जब गर्भ का प्रॉब्लम होता है उन सबको सही करके ही हम लोग आईवीएफ स्टार्ट करते हैं, फर्टिलिटी ट्रीटमेंट स्टार्ट करते हैं। जिसका ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम, बहुत ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम है, तो ऑब्वियसली इट इम्पेयर्स द इम्प्लांटेशन पोटेंशियल ऑफ द यूट्रस, तो उनको प्रेगनेंसी रेट कम हो जाती है। जिनका फाइब्रॉइड्स है, क्लियर कट पॉलिप्स है, उन सबको रिमूव करके जब हम ट्रीटमेंट करते हैं दे होल्ड अ बेटर सक्सेस रेट। द थर्ड पैरामीटर अबाउट एनी फर्टिलिटी, दैट इज द मेल फैक्टर, सीमेन एनालिसिस टेलिंग अबाउट द स्पर्म मॉर्फोलॉजी, और कई लोगों को हम DFI भी करने के लिए बोलते हैं, दैट इज द DNA फ्रैगमेंटेशन इंडेक्स। तो स्पर्म की प्रॉब्लम के लिए भी आईवीएफ किया जाता है, कितना ज्यादा ये प्रॉब्लम है, कितना सीवियर मॉर्फोलॉजी प्रॉब्लम या काउंट प्रॉब्लम है, DFI कैसा है, इन सब का आईवीएफ में असर पड़ता है। जो नेक्स्ट चीज है वो आपके अपने हाथों में, दैट इज अबाउट योर लाइफस्टाइल फैक्टर्स। सो वन थिंग इज स्मोकिंग, प्लीज क्विट स्मोकिंग बिकॉज स्मोकिंग हैज गॉट निकोटीन, सिगरेट्स हैव गॉट निकोटीन, जो कि दोनों अंडों के लिए और स्पर्म के लिए बहुत ही खतरनाक है। और ये स्मोकिंग एक्टिव हो, मतलब पेशेंट खुद कर रहा हो या उसका हस्बैंड कर रहा हो, या फिर आप पैसिव स्मोकिंग कहीं और से अगर धुआं आ रहा है, किसी भी तरीके से जब निकोटीन एक्सपोजर होता है, ये दोनों इट्स गॉट डिलीटेरियस इफेक्ट्स ऑन बोथ स्पर्म्स as well as on the eggs. So we advise all the couple who are starting their infertility treatment to please quit smoking, to wash out the nicotine from their body before embarking on fertility treatment. So next lifestyle factor जो आपके अपने हाथों में, that is about your weight. So weight should always be optimized. जो बहुत overweight patients हैं, बहुत ही obese हैं, BMI जिनका बहुत ज़्यादा है, और दूसरी तरफ जो बहुत ही skinny built patients हैं, जिनका BMI 18 से कम, इन दोनों ही तरीकों के patients में जो the two ends of the weight, both have got hormonal imbalance, hypothalamic disturbances, which comes in the way of they conceiving and carrying out a healthy pregnancy. जो लास्ट फैक्टर जो मैं इंपॉर्टेंट बताना चाहती हूँ, दैट इज एन एक्सट्रेनियस फैक्टर, बाहर का फैक्टर है, apart from what the couple factors are there, and plays an important role, that is the choice of a fertility clinic. It depends too much on the expertise, experience, the technology used in the embryology department, the success rate of the fertility clinic that you are going and seeking the treatment for. So hence decide and choose wisely. Knowledge is power. Gather information and then only go and start your treatment. और लास्टली मैं एक देना चाहती हूँ होप, अगर आपको IVF फेलियर हो भी चुके हैं, देन ऑल्सो डू नॉट लूज होप, बिकॉज कहीं ना कहीं आशा की किरण जरूर होती है जब हमें पता चल जाता है कि प्रॉब्लम कहाँ है. Most of the times we are able to address the issue and we are able to help out the couple in conceiving and taking home a live birth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pallavi, for talking in detail about the realistic success rate of IVF and also filling lots of hope in couples. I will next move on, request Dr. Sri Lakshmi to talk about causes of IVF failure. Over to you, doctor. Dr. Sri Lakshmi, your computer is on mute. You have to unmute.
It's unmute only.
It's coming now. It's audible now. No, it's still unmute, doctor. You have to. It's still mute. You have to unmute it. Yes. Right.
Good evening to everyone. It's good to be here and have a good interaction with you all. Till now, you have heard about the factors which have an impact over the success of the IVF as described by Dr. Pallavi. But to give any treatment, we need to first identify the cause. So let's quickly go through the causes of an IVF failure. Can you change to the next slide?
It's not moving, doctor. I think you have to.
It is your screen only that is shared.
Yeah. It is moving. You're able to see the screen?
We are able to, but it is not. You have to change the slide.
It's not moving. I think Akash, can you take over?
Yep.
Yeah. So to have a successful IVF, you need to have a proper good embryo, which you can see in the left side, where the embryo actually implants into the uterus, that is the womb, where the baby develops actually. So any factor which is going to affect the embryo development or anything which is having an impact over the uterus, that is the womb, can actually lead to a failure. And we can look into the other multifactorial reasons also which can cause IVF failure. Now, if you look, next slide. Yeah, if we look into the embryo factors which are going to have an impact over the embryo are, to have a good embryo, as I told you, you should have a good sperm and a good oocyte, that is the egg factor. So if suppose the sperm factor is poor or the egg factor is poor, finally it's going to give you a poor quality embryo, which may not implant, or if they implant also may end in abortions. So we will look into the factors which will be affecting these sperms and oocytes separately in the subsequent slides. Apart from this, if you see in cases with couples with the repeat IVF failures, around 2 to 3% can have structural abnormalities in their chromosomes. All of us know that all the human beings have around 46 chromosomes which are arranged in 23 pairs. So this structural rearrangements means a part of the chromosome may break and attach to another chromosome, or a part of the chromosome may be deleted, or they may have an extra chromosome, or there is complete deletion of one of the chromosomes. So all these can be identified when you do a karyotyping to the couple. So these actually, if either of the parent is having an abnormal chromosome pattern, that leads to an abnormal embryo which may not implant or end in abortions. So along with these, the other important things are culture conditions. Definitely, even though you have a good sperm and a good oocyte, that is the egg factor, the embryo growth also depends upon the surrounding culture systems. That is, if you have a suboptimal lab conditions where the poor air quality or temperature maintenance or pH is not maintained properly, then even though the egg and sperm are good, the embryo may get arrested during its growth, or it may give a poor quality embryo which will give a failure pregnancy. Next slide, please. So if you quickly go through the factors which affect the sperm quality, all of us know that sperms are very delicate structures, that they may be damaged even with slight increase in temperature. So if you observe the repeat IVF failures, it is not very uncommon for us in our practice to see that a man who has a fairly normal semen analysis, when we test for their DNA, we obviously find an increased sperm DNA damage. So ideally, all the couples who are having failed IVF we can go for the advanced sperm DNA testing in those couples. So if you, as I told you, they are very delicate structures which we get damaged even by increased testicular temperature. Now, if you see, varicocele means dilated veins which are surrounding the scrotum. So whenever there is dilatation of the veins, there is blood stagnation which will raise the local temperature and cause damage to the sperms. To that extent, if we look, even when we are using laptops, we have the habit of keeping the laptops on our thighs and working. So that itself can produce some heat generation, and that can cause even the testicular damage. Coming to the lifestyle habits, yeah, smoking and alcohol and some of the recreational drugs are actually having an impact over the sperm production, and they even damage the sperm quality, which may ultimately lead to a poor embryo quality or an arrested embryos or failed fertilization at times. Now, stress is something which we all go through, but prolonged stress for prolonged periods actually have an impact over the sperm production. But too much stress sometimes can even alter our sleep patterns and also the food habits, which may either lead to excessive eating and gaining weight, that is obesity, or we may take a poor diet which is not adequate for proper healthy lifestyle. So increased BMI, that is increased body mass index, actually leads to a hormonal imbalance, that is the testosterone and estrogen levels ratios will be altered in those men, and those can have an impact over the sperm DNA. Now, there is a misnomer that infrequent ejaculation means prolonged abstinence actually improves the sperm counts, but that is actually false. What happens is, because of the infrequent ejaculation, the sperms will be functionally become old and they die. These dead sperms actually have an impact over the freshly produced sperms, damaging their DNA. So infrequent ejaculation is something which we need to think about. The other thing, obviously, aging. As the age of the man increases, the sperm quality decreases. And the other thing is the infection, which can also damage the sperm DNA. Apart from it, the routine medications which we use to control the BP or acidity, those also have an impact. Certain medications can cause damage to the sperms. Along with that, anti-cancerous drugs, pollution, toxins, radiations, all these lead to sperm damage. So ideally, all the patients with repeat IVF failures, so ideally we should go for the advanced sperm DNA damage testing. So next slide. Yeah, the other one factors which are going to affect the egg or the oocytes, as Dr. Pallavi told, age is something, age of the wife is something, the single most criterion which is going to predict the success of IVF. If you look at the graph in the left side, the blue one shows the fertility rate of the wife when compared to her age. If you see, the highest pregnancy rates are below 30 years. So once they are crossing 30 years, there is decline in the fertility rate. One is their number of eggs are being reduced. Along with that, the genetically abnormal eggs are going to be increased. If you see the left side graph, you can see a drastic rise in the genetically abnormal eggs production. Less than 30 years, if you take 100 eggs, less than 10% is the chance of having a genetically abnormal egg. But as the age increases, there is escalating increase in the abnormal embryo egg production. So 35 years and above, you can see that is drastically increasing from 30% to 50% and finally 90% if they are above 40 years. So the same way, if you see the abortion rates in the left side graph, the red line shows an increase in the abortion rates. This is corresponding to the amount of genetically abnormal eggs production. So next slide, please. Yeah. The other factor which is going to have an impact over the egg is the weight, definitely. BMI is the body mass index, which is calculated using your height, weight and height. So according to WHO, the ideal BMI is 20 to 24.9. So if you see the graph, there is highest implantation and also the pregnancy rates or take-home baby rate is good in ideal BMI candidates, that is 20 to 24.9. Undernutrition, that is below 20 BMI, or overweight above 25 are having reduced take-home baby rates. And there is drastic decline in the take-home baby rate once their BMI is above 30, that is obesity. So what happens in obesity is definitely there is hormonal imbalance. So that is going to have an impact over the egg quality. The one more thing is when you undergo IVF, the dose required to stimulate the ovary is also increased, and there is chance of having less number of eggs retrieved, and the quality of the egg retrieved is also very poor. At times it may lead to a poor quality embryo which may end in abortions. The same obesity may have an impact even on the development of the pregnancy-induced hypertension or diabetes during pregnancy. So the chances of taking home baby will be very less as the weight of the woman increases above the ideal weight. The other one is smoking. Definitely when you compare smokers and non-smokers, there is 50% reduction rate in the take-home baby rate in those women who smoke. So even passive smoking, if that is the situation, there is 25% reduction in the take-home baby rate. So ideally, if the man is smoking, so wife is also subjected to passive smoking. So ideally, they should, whether it is male or female, should ideally quit smoking before they start any fertility treatments. Because this is going to affect the egg quality definitely, and even the fertilization rates are reduced in such women. And there is also a rapid decline in the egg reserve in smokers when compared to non-smokers. Now, the other factor is stress. Definitely, infertility itself is stressful. Along with that, the treatments are also stressful. And once the IVF is failed, the stress increases drastically. So this stress, actually what happens is the stress hormone levels increase. There is alteration in the hormonal production in the female. Along with that, the same stress actually amounts that they have a faulty sleep patterns and faulty food habits that may either lead to obesity or undernutrition, which is finally going to decline their oocyte quality or egg quality. So the next slide, please. Yeah. Now, if you look at this picture, the uppermost left one shows the normal uterine cavity. So ideally, for an embryo to sit in, the womb should be very good enough to accept the embryo and allow it to grow. Now, if you look at the right-hand picture, if you see, certain women may have a septum at birth itself. Right picture. Yes. So this is something, a tissue ingrowth starting from the top of the uterus and it extends into the cavity. So for certain women, this fails to be absorbed and this uterine septum actually can lead to increased miscarriage rates. So if that is there, that needs to be treated. The other one is polyp. Polyp is nothing but a localized growth of the endometrial lining. So this is going to mechanically interfere with the embryo implantation and at times causes the miscarriage rates. The other ones are fibroids. Fibroids are nothing but the localized growth of the uterine muscle. So all fibroids may not lead to miscarriage, but certainly fibroids which are protruding into the cavity or which are going to alter the shape of the uterine cavity are definitely going to have an impact over the embryo implantation as well as they lead to increased miscarriage rates. The other factor is endometriosis. Endometriosis is nothing but the uterus lining is supposed to be only in the cavity. The same uterine lining, if it is found outside the uterus, it starts growing in each cycle as it grows in the cavity with each cycle. So what happens, the same endometriosis, when it implants onto the ovary and it starts growing, that leads to a chocolate cyst. So these actually will affect the oocyte quality, and the same endometriosis can also alter the endometrial receptivity. That is nothing but acceptance of the embryo by the uterine lining. So that is going to be altered. Adenomyosis, if you see the lowermost picture, adenomyosis is another factor which is going to alter the receptivity. Adenomyosis is nothing but the same uterine lining, if it goes inside the uterine muscle and starts growing, that is called adenomyosis. So endometriosis and adenomyosis are going to alter the receptivity of the endometrium. The other factor is infection, any sort of infection, whether it is infection at the entry of the uterus, that is cervicitis or endometritis, are need to be treated prior to the transfer of the embryo. Because in countries like India, where for us tuberculosis is much highly prevalent, that needs to be ruled out if endometrium is very unhealthy on hysteroscope, or if they give any prior abnormal menstrual disturbances, or in conditions where we cannot find any cause. So tuberculous endometritis is something needs to be ruled out. Because this tuberculous endometritis can also lead to intrauterine adhesions. If you see the picture above, left upper picture, yes, intrauterine adhesions. They are the ones which extend from wall to wall and they impede the embryo implantation. So it can be either post-sequelae to some infection, or it can be because of prior some surgeries like DNCs where the endometrium is being damaged, and that can lead to adhesion formation. So these adhesions, if they are present, they actually inhibit the embryo from implantation. So next slide, please. Next is the hydrosalpinx. If you see the topmost picture, you have a normal tube on the right side and then abnormal tube, dilated tube on the left side. So actually these tubes are filled with fluid. So if they are communicating to the uterus, what happens, this fluid is highly toxic to the embryo and it kills the embryo, or at times it can itself flush the embryo outside, so leading to failure. So ideally this hydrosalpinx should be identified and they should be clipped or removed. The other one is suboptimal treatment of medical conditions, like example thyroid, hypothyroidism or diabetes is something. They increase the miscarriage rates if they are not treated properly prior to embryo transfer. Autoantibodies is something, condition where the body starts producing fighter cells against its own body cells. So these actually will either alter the endometrium, or sometimes they even cause miscarriage. For example, if you take anti-thyroid antibodies or anti-phospholipid antibodies, they actually either inhibit the implantation or they may cause miscarriage. So those also need to be checked. Altered endometrial receptivity is nothing but, see, if the embryo is transferred, now the endometrium or uterine lining should be ready to accept the embryo. So this window of implantation is actually normally located 5 days post ovulation. So this window may actually be altered in some women. If you take 100 repeat IVF failure cases, in that 25% of them may have this alteration. The other thing, as we have discussed, suboptimal lab culture conditions, in spite of having a good oocyte and a good sperm, if the lab culture conditions are not maintained properly, then it leads to embryo arrest. The other, last but not the least, the embryo transfer. So meticulous embryo transfer is essential for the success of an IVF. So when we transfer the embryo, we have to take care that we do not injure the uterine lining and place the embryos safely into the uterus. So rather than doing a blind transfer, it is always better to do an ultrasound guided transfer. So for certain women, what happens is the uterus entry point may be so tightly closed that they have to manipulate the uterus or apply some traction to pass the catheter inside. So by doing that manipulation or applying traction, so uterine contractions can start and they themselves can actually expel the embryos outside. So we need to inquire if there was any difficult embryo transfers in prior IVF cases, prior IVF failure cases. And if it is there, it has to be addressed. The other thing is idiopathic, that is unknown causes. In spite of the advanced investigations, whatever we are having, there are certain couples where we cannot find the reason for their IVF failure. So still research is going on with them. So hopefully we will have a good outcome in further research. Next. So the aim of the R is to reduce the negative impact of the factors over which we have control, either through by giving a medication or through behavioral modification, especially the lifestyle changes. So whatever you plant today, you will be harvesting later. So all the best for you, and do try with all the confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sri Lakshmi. Now I would like to invite Dr. Ritu Hinduja to talk about treatment options, sperm and uterus. Over to you, doctor.
Diana. Hello everyone. I am Dr. Ritu Hinduja and I will be speaking to you about what can be done for patients who have repeated IVF failures in perspective to the sperm and the uterus only. So Dr. Sri Lakshmi has taken you through various reasons or causes why a IVF cycle can fail or not result in a pregnancy. I will be focusing only on the factors that we need to rectify regarding the sperm and the uterus. So most of the common questions that the patients ask when they come to us with repeated IVF failures is, why did this happen? Did I do something to harm the embryo? Does it mean that I'm destined never to have a baby? Well, none of this is true. You have to understand that when we do not succeed in an IVF cycle or we've not got a pregnancy, repeated IVF failures means we've done 3 transfers and we've still not got a pregnancy. So you have to understand that it is a seed and the soil theory. So when a seed is good and the soil is good, only then can we achieve a healthy pregnancy. मेरे कहने का मतलब ये है कि एक बीज अच्छा होना चाहिए, उसके साथ जो मट्टी जिसमें हम वो बीज को बो रहे हैं वो अच्छी होनी चाहिए, और इसके इन दोनों के साथ ही हमें एक अच्छी प्रेगनेंसी मिल सकती है. तो बीज मतलब हमारा भ्रूण, मट्टी मतलब हमारा गर्भाशय, और हम एक अच्छी प्रेगनेंसी, दोनों अच्छी चीजें होंगी तो ही हमें मिलेगी. So you have to understand that the embryo is nothing but the combination of the sperm and the egg. So if the sperm is good and the egg is good, the final product embryo is mostly always good and we can achieve a good healthy pregnancy. I will be talking to you about the endometrium part of it first. The endometrium, if it's not like we think that we've still not got a pregnancy after 3 embryo transfers, we do something which is known as a keyhole diagnosis. It is basically putting a hysteroscope. It is also known in Hindi a durbeen. We put it inside the uterus and we check for various pathologies that Dr. Sri Lakshmi has already spoken to you about, like the fibroids, the polyps, the variations in the size and the shape of the uterus. So if we find a fibroid, we rectify it in the same sitting. We go ahead, we operate the fibroid, we remove it, we make sure that the uterine cavity is good in size, and we can actually rectify lateral walls also. We can widen the uterine cavity if we have to, remove any polyps that we can see if they were not already diagnosed. The shape of the uterus, if we are seeing an arcuate uterus, that means there's dipping on the fundus of the uterus where the embryo has to actually go and implant. The embryo actually goes and implants here. So if there's a dipping here, or if there's a septum that Dr. Sri Lakshmi has spoken about, we go and rectify that also in the same sitting. So the scopy that I'm talking about, the hysteroscopy, is not only diagnostic. Yes, we go and we check what the uterus is like and how it looks like and everything. But we also, in the same sitting, rectify any pathology or anything we see inside the uterus in the same sitting as well, so that the woman doesn't have to keep taking anesthesia over and over again. So it's like entering the room to see where the table is kept, where the chair is kept, etc. So we actually enter the uterine cavity to see where what is and how it is, to actually give you a good uterus that would probably be receptive to implantation. We've also already spoken about hydrosalpinx and how it affects implantation by the fluid actually entering the uterine cavity, or certain cytokines and chemical substances that can also hamper implantation of an embryo. So what we go and do by a laparoscope, that means we enter abdominally rather than vaginally, and we go and clip or detach these fallopian tubes right where they get attached to the uterus. So right at the point where the fallopian tube and the uterus are joined, this is where we go and actually delink the fallopian tubes from the uterine cavity. The fallopian tubes can be delinked or removed in total. That all these decisions will be taken by your treating doctor itself. And while doing a laparoscopy, if we find some endometriosis, we go and we burn the endometriotic spots as well. So in turn, giving us a chance of getting a better pregnancy rate. So now you're talking about the endometrium. You have to understand that endometrium is a very essential part of us trying to get a pregnancy. So there are two factors which are very, very important in an endometrium. One factor is the thickness of the endometrium. So the endometrium thickness should be more or less about, say, 7 to 11 mm is a good endometrial thickness that, all the IVF specialists or the consultants would like to achieve when we are trying to do an embryo transfer. Along with the thickness, we also look at the morphology, or how the endometrium looks when we are doing an ultrasound. That should be, this 3 lines should be visible. So if you can see 1, 2, 3, these 3 lines should be visible when we are doing an ultrasound, while we are monitoring you for the follicular development. Along with that, how your endometrium looks like, we need to see those 3 beautiful lines on the ultrasound. And that tells us, yes, it's a good endometrium, and, we are expecting good results out of it. So what can we do if we don't get a good endometrium in patients? We can do a mock cycle. In a mock cycle, what we do is we just prepare your endometrium the way we would have prepared it for an embryo transfer, but we just monitor it either in a natural cycle or a cycle where we give you some hormonal tablets from mouth. So we just monitor these endometrial thickness, and we keep doing serial ultrasounds to see how the thickness is growing, and we do good endometrium is created. Second is to do a frozen embryo transfer. Now, in a fresh embryo transfer, the cycle goes like you're stimulated with injections for 11 days. And on the 18th day, when your embryo is ready, the transfer happens in the same cycle in which you were given those hormonal injections. And you take the transfer in the same cycle itself. In a frozen embryo transfer, what we do is we stimulate your ovaries, we get the eggs out, we create embryos, and we freeze them. We don't transfer the embryo in the same cycle. We give you a month's break, and then in the next month after that, we just prepare your endometrium for the embryo transfer, and we transfer the embryos in this cycle. This probably gives us better results in achieving a pregnancy. We can also, if frozen embryo transfer, sometimes exogenous hormones, that means hormones which we are given to you by either orally or some other route, are not working well to increase your endometrial thickness, then we can do maybe a natural cycle transfer, because it has been seen that certain women who don't create a good endometrium on medications, they sometimes have a very beautiful endometrium when nothing is given to them and we let nature take its course. So those techniques can also be applied, and we transfer the embryo in a cycle with no medications given to particularly develop the endometrium. An increase in the dose of estrogen can also be advised to you. If all of the above has not worked and we are not able to still get a good endometrium, like I'd spoken before, a diagnostic SOS operative hysteroscopy would be advised to you. That means your doctor would like to go inside your uterine cavity, put a scope, have a look, rectify whatever they may find inside, maybe intrauterine adhesions. That means the two walls of the uterus have got stuck to each other, a polyp, a fibroid, or whatever. They will rectify it and come out of the uterus. There are certain adjuvants that can be given to you as well. Your doctor can advise you to start taking aspirin. GCSF is like an injection which is loaded in a plastic cannula and given to you while preparing your endometrium, and it's inserted inside your uterine cavity. This is one route of giving it. The second route of giving it is subcutaneous injections. So your doctor will choose which of the two routes they probably want to give GCSF to you by. And endometrial scratching is nothing but, before we start preparing your endometrium for the embryo transfer, on the second day itself, a little nick or a scratch is given to your endometrium to release certain hormones locally in the uterine cavity itself. So please understand that these are adjuvant therapies which may or may not have benefit. In some patients, they do give us success. In some patients, they don't. But it's your perspective of your doctor, what they work with, what they've got success with, and they probably can use one of these in helping you out. There is a newer experimental technique which is now come in recently, and it's still in its initial experimental stages, which is known as the PRP, or the platelet-rich plasma infusion, in which the blood from the woman who is attempting a pregnancy is taken, is centrifuged, the blood components and the plasma are separated, and this plasma is then loaded in a plastic cannula like an IUI or an ET, and then transferred inside the uterine cavity. So these are things that we can do to help improve your endometrium for implantation. Now, what is most important that Dr. Lakshmi had also spoken to you about is that the embryo and the endometrium need to talk to each other for us to get a pregnancy. So if you can see, the endometrium and the embryo need to progress together in a timeline. If they don't progress together, the embryo is not able to embed itself inside the endometrium. So sometimes what happens is that the embryo is growing pretty well because the embryo is with us in the laboratory and we can monitor it. But the endometrium is either lagging behind or has gone much ahead from what the stage of the embryo is. In this, we cannot diagnose on an ultrasound or a hysteroscopy, but there is a technique to diagnose the timing of the endometrium and what time we should transfer the embryo is known as an endometrium receptivity array. Now, how do we do this is that you will be prepared with medications like you would have been prepared for a frozen embryo transfer. Whatever medications your doctor has decided to give you in a frozen embryo transfer cycle, all those medications in the same dose will be given to you in the ERA cycle. Once the doctor feels that, yes, you are ready to take the embryo transfer, instead of doing the embryo transfer, a biopsy, that means a small piece of your endometrium will be taken. This small piece of your endometrium will be sent to a laboratory for testing. They will test this piece of endometrium and give us a report saying that yes, the time that you are planning or comprehending to do an embryo transfer is the right time to do it. Go ahead and do it at this time itself. Or no, the endometrium is still not receptive. It is still lagging behind. Wait for another 12 hours or 4 hours to do the embryo transfer, and we follow those recommendations. Or it will say no, when you were comprehending to do the embryo transfer, the endometrium has actually gone much ahead than what you were planning, and you need to do an embryo transfer much prior to when you were comprehending to do it. So the thing is, what this endometrium receptivity array does is it helps us personalize the embryo transfer for you. So we can do a personalized embryo transfer for a particular lady who is not getting pregnant by embryo transfers that would have been done on day 5 itself. Now we're talking about the sperm. Like Dr. Lakshmi had said, there are a lot of factors that affect the integrity of the sperm. The membrane that's covering the sperm actually gets damaged at a lot of places, and this is known as sperm DNA fragmentation. There is multi-causal etiology, and we can't really go in and correct each and every reason to why the sperm is getting damaged. So what we can do is we can use different techniques to select the sperm. One of the techniques to select good sperm with less DNA fragmentation is a magnetic assortment of cells. Now, a magnetic assortment of sperms, what do? We do nothing. We just take the sperm semen sample of the husband. We wash it like how we would have generally washed it for any procedure, like an ICSI or an IVF, and we pass it through a magnetic column. If you can see these are the magnetic columns, and the washed sperm is actually in these tubes, and it is under the effect of that magnetic field. And the sperms which are then passing through this magnetic field are getting collected in these test tubes, and these are the sperms which are then used for the process of ICSI. So what is basically happening when we are doing MAX is that under the force of magnetic field, under that magnetic force, the sperms which are damaged are getting attracted towards the magnet and get stuck to the wall of the chamber that is used for sorting these sperms. And the sperms which are active and have less DNA fragmentation are the sperms that get collected in these test tubes, and we can use these sperms for the process of insemination through ICSI or IVF. Now, if you go to remember what I had spoken to you earlier, that embryo is a combination of a sperm and the eggs. So what are we doing eventually is using a good sperm to give us a good embryo and thereby giving us maybe better success rates. So sometimes all of this may not work, and sometimes we need a little extra help, and taking a little extra help does not hurt anyone. We can opt to take donor sperms if we think that sperms is the reason why we're not getting good embryos, and that's the reason we're not getting a pregnancy. Or we can opt to use donor eggs, where we can replace the egg that we use by a donor egg, use the husband's sperm, create an embryo, and then transfer it into a woman who is expecting to get pregnant. Thank you so much. This is all from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Ritu, for explaining the treatment options sperm and uterus. Now I request Dr. Kritika Devi to talk about treatment options embryo.
Namaste, Vanakkam. I'm very glad to be a part of this NOVA's educative process of everything about fertility. So today I will be talking to you about how to evaluate the embryo further when everything else fails. Next slide. This question arises in our mind when we have an IVF negative. What went wrong? Next. As Dr. Ritu had told, it's always a chemistry between the soil and a seed. Just like a farmer wonders what went wrong, we too wonder what was the mistake, why this particular patient failed. Next, whether this was a problem with our uterus, next, or is it with our embryo? Next slide. Usually, we all go by the external appearance of the embryo and then transfer the embryo. To you, it might sound like, Doctor, you told me it was a good looking embryo. It was a good grade embryo, but why did I have a negative result? For you to understand this, I want you to see this picture. Next. Yes, this is a good looking apple. Looking good to you and to me. But then when you cut it, there might be surprises inside. Next. Same way, whenever we do an embryo biopsy, an embryo which is normal, healthy looking, may not be healthy genetically inside, which we will not be able to assess by our routine IVF methodology. Next. That is why the advent of pre-implantation diagnostic tests, which is of great help to us. Next. So we commonly call it as an abbreviation called PGTA, that is pre-implantation genetic test for aneuploidies. So what do we do here is, you all know that we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. So we assess these chromosome numbers, whether they are normal, before we transfer the embryo. The next question what the patients ask me is when I suggest PGT, Doctor, I am normal, my partner is normal. How can I have an abnormal embryo? Please remember, individually, both of you can be normal. But when the genes get mixed up from the egg and the sperm during fertilization, there could be a problem in the genetics. So there can be an abnormal embryo even if both of you are perfectly normal externally. That is why we go for this PGT test where we select the best embryos and then transfer. Next. So the purpose of PGT is mainly to increase our pregnancy rate, where we select the normal embryo and then transfer, and then where we discard the embryos which are abnormal, rather than giving a negative result, or you may get pregnant and then land up with a miscarriage. For you to understand, I'll show you the sample report of my patient. Next. This is Mrs. X, who was 38 years old with history of repeated IVF failures. And when we did a PGT for her, you will find that out of the 4 embryos what we had sent for testing, only 1 embryo had come as genetically normal. So when I transferred this particular normal embryo, we were fortunate to have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy child. Next. I wanted you to see this small video clipping of how we do a biopsy. This is a day 3 embryo where just one particular cell is removed from the embryo and sent for genetic testing. Don't worry, removing one cell doesn't hurt the embryo if done properly. So to the left, you see a day 3 embryo, and to your right, you can see the day 5 embryo. So this is what we generally do to do a biopsy. And we generally prefer a blastocyst biopsy. Next. Now I want to address certain common queries raised by patients. The first question they ask when I suggest PGT when their previous IVF cycles fail is, why PGT was not done for me in my first attempt? Why can't you people do PGT as a routine for all patients in their IVF? So remember, PGT is an invasive test, just like how we have seen in the previous slide. If not done properly by technical expertise person or in a proper center, it can damage your embryo, and it includes extra cost also. So generally, PGT we reserve for patients with proper indications like women with advanced age or people who have repeated IVF failures. For you to understand this, I'll just give a small example. If you have fever, you don't get admitted and start your IV drips or injections the very first day. You first take tablets. If you are not okay, then only you go for this advanced treatments. Same way, PGT is always, since it is an invasive test, it is reserved for people who need it. The next query, the favorite question I always get is, Doctor, will it give 100% success rate? Remember, IVF is a procedure where we fight with nature, fight to give a life. So there are other microscopic factors involved to give a success. PGT definitely improves your success rate. Latest research says it increases about 25 to 30% from your routine IVF, but not 100%. Next, you need not worry. It is not an additional procedure on you. It doesn't require any additional procedure or treatment for you. All we do is in the lab where we take a cell from the embryo. If we do a blastocyst biopsy, the only difference to you would be we will not transfer it as a fresh embryo. We freeze the embryo and then we transfer it in the frozen cycle. So that will be the only difference to you. Next question that is commonly asked, the worst come worst, if all my embryos are abnormal, what do I do? All my doors are closed. Is there no chance of me becoming a parent? Next slide. So as we all say, when one door closes, there is always another door that is open, and it's up to us to look at it. Next. So for women where there are repeated PGT test reports saying all the embryos are abnormal, we have an option of donor program if you're willing to look at it. And we can either consider a donor egg, donor sperm option, or a donor embryo based on your particular medical record. Your doctor can decide and suggest what is required for you. So next slide. Remember, there are a lot of ways. Don't lose your courage. Fight till the end. Never give up. And success will be yours. Thank you.
Thank you, all the doctors, for presenting about the failures, the reasons for failures in IVF. It's already 5 o'clock, but still I'll take some more time to ask questions, and a lot of questions have come in. The first question that I would like to ask is to Dr. Pallavi, and this is a question from Rajivi Shah, age 29, currently undergoing treatment with Nova. Except male fertility problem, everything is normal. We had PGD, PGS, tested 4 embryos. T1 was positive, but there was no growth. T2 negative. We had done ERA, EMA, ALICE after T2, which all are normal. T3 negative. All 3 are set. What can be the reason for these failures or abortion at Nova? Are there any further advanced mechanisms available to get success?
Yeah. Diana, hello? Am I audible,
Yes,
Diana?
Yes, you are. You are, doctor.
Yeah. Regarding this patient, Rajeshwari, who has undergone 4 embryo transfers with all our frozen embryo transfer with PGS, PGD tested embryos. The things that she has undergone all these transfers at Nova only. The things that we can see is how serious is the male factor. So one time the patient has conceived and then aborted. So we have to keep it in mind. If the male factor is really very, very severe, very poor male morphology and DFI, so the conception chances and live birth will be reduced. Probably in this couple, I can suggest the male partner to probably undergo one karyotype also. So karyotype will be able to decipher, is there any major chromosomal abnormality like chromosome 1, chromosome 2. So we have seen that these couples really struggle to have a child. And as you can see in their IVF history also, they had one conception which resulted in abortion. And the remaining of the embryo transfers, it was not successful. So in this case where they have done IVF in a standard center with the PGS, PGD tested, one abortion has happened, probably we have to look keenly into the male factor, how severe it is. Probably an assistance with the karyotype of the male male partner will also throw some light on it. Over to you, Tina.
Yeah, thank you, doctor. We have a second question to Dr. Sri Lakshmi. This is the question is about, hi, I'm 34 years old, had a miscarriage of 6 weeks 2 years back. I had 2 IUI and 1 IVF recently, but my embryo did not form. Doctor said maybe egg quality is not good. Doctor suggested for donor egg. Please advise My AMH is 4.
Okay, Akash Iyer, just what I came to know is you have had a miscarriage. So the fault can be at the embryo level or the uterus level if you think. Now you have undergone IVF and an embryo has not formed. So even though your AMH is 4, we need to know what kind of egg quality did you get at the time of retrieval, how many of them are actually mature, and what is the fertilization status. Did they fertilize or not? We need to look about the sperm factor also if an embryo is not growing. So what is the semen analysis? How is it? Is your DFI, that is DNA fragmentation index, raised? All these factors actually give you an idea about whether you can have a successful pregnancy or IVF in the next cycle. Because both egg and sperm are important in forming an embryo. So we need to identify whether it is because of the egg or the sperm factor. So you have told AMH4 is fine, that you have a good reserve. Your age is something which is like 34, which is almost near across 30. In our Indian scenario, even for the Western, we say 35, above 30 years, the chances of genetically abnormal eggs do increase after 30 years. So definitely we need to consider that. But at the same time, the sperm factor also needs to be considered. So whether the DFI, DNA fragmentation index of the sperm is elevated or not. So if at all the DFI is more, probably we can give some medical treatment prior to starting IVF. Check for the DFI again. If it is still high, probably we can retrieve the sperms from the testis and do use that testicular sperms for ICSI so that you have a better chance, because testicular sperms DFI will be less when compared to an ejaculate DFI. So then the chances can be improved.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Srilakshmi. Dr. Ritu, there's a question to you. This is a bit long question, and excuse me for the technical language. So there's a person who has asking Dr. Ritu. She had 7 recurrent miscarriages. Her age is 47. We have been inspired by Dr. Ritu Hinduja, who treated my baby. That is same as me, and she has twins. I have suffered 7 miscarriages over the span of 17 years, and the following is a list of my journey. 4 miscarriages in first trimester, 3 miscarriages in second trimester, with the last one reaching 21 weeks. I have had IVF for one of those pregnancies, and the rest were natural conception. And all the tests on the fetus showed normal chromosomes. So I think the only thing left is to try transabdominal circlage, as I just cannot seem to hold my baby to term. One cycle did not work. Another cycle, the egg collection happened too late, and I also had unsuccessful IUI. The last 3 pregnancies, I was on steroids of high natural killer cells, and I believe the steroids helped me to reach further. I have brought my BMI down from 40 to 32, suffered from PCOS, fibroids and polyps. Also had aspirin, heparin, Clexane for itchy blood and progesterone, even intralipids, also antibiotics to avoid infections. We had given up due date to my age and emotional trauma this has caused, but after seeing my baby, you have given me hope. I would be great to speak to you today and on your seminar if possible. Dr. Ritu?
Hello, I'm thankful that you have asked me this question. You do seem to have a very bad obstetric history. However, see, first, I would like to, since you've said that you've had previous fibroids and polyps and things like this, before I do anything, I would like to do a fresh workup. I would like to have a relook hysteroscopy. You said your age was around 47 as far as I remember. So these factors also play a very important role. So first, I would like to do a relohystroscopy to see if your uterus is fine or not. Second, I would like to repeat your AMH to see at this age whether you have good eggs left behind or not, the number. But at the age of 47, the quality of eggs that I'm expecting is not really very good. So having done a good ultrasound, a relohystroscopy, and done your AMH level, your case looks like something that will go in the direction of a donor egg IVF. However, to be able to advise you better, I need to see you personally, and I need to go through your entire file and do some more intensive testing before we can go ahead with doing any kind of treatment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ritu. I would like to take a last question because it's already crossed 5 o'clock. This question is to Dr. Kritika. Hi, this is Geeta. I'm 32 years old. I have underwent IVF in this February at Nova. Ended up failed IVF with 0 embryos. After fertilization, all 5 embryos stopped growing. I want to know how to proceed with the next cycle to no problem with this egg or sperm.
Okay. So please don't worry. There is always hope. We have had patients with your similar history. I previously had a patient like this who even conceived spontaneously after 2 months of medications. So please don't give up hope. So in your situation, why we didn't have embryos, there could be multiple factors. So I'll have to evaluate your endocrine factors and your husband's sperm factors also. Find out what could be the reason. And based on the evaluation of you and your husband, we can come to a conclusion what can be done better in your next attempt. And similarly, I have to know your stimulation drugs, what was the trigger given, and how the oocyte's appearance was. And based on all the history, definitely we will be able to help you further.
Thank you, Dr. Kritika. So that brings to our end of the webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for the participation. Thank you, doctors, for explaining us about the IVF failure. To all the attendees over there, yes, it is very emotional. It is traumatizing when we get to know that, my cycle is not successful and I have to go through the repeat cycles again. We always want our patients to come to us, talk to us in detail. We were able to answer only 4 questions, but there are a lot of other people who have asked many questions today. I request you to come to the center, talk to us, talk to the doctors, and also your questions will be answered personally, so you will get an answer anyways after this. Our next webinar is on Monday, and the topic for the webinar is Understanding IUI. So we have 4 panelists across from Nova IVF who will come and talk to us about IUI in detail. Till then, thank you so much. Stay safe, stay home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.